I stopped to help two girls on a rainy night, then they asked for my number. The rain came down hard that night, not the soft kind that makes everything look clean and quiet, the heavy kind, the kind that fills up the gutters and turns the road into a dark mirror, the kind that makes you want to be anywhere but outside. Nathan was in his car, both hands on the wheel, eyes forward, jaw tight. He had been driving for 40 minutes and still had another 20 to go. His shirt was still damp from earlier in the evening when he had parked too far from the office and walked through a 10-minute downpour just to sit through a meeting that could have been an email. His coffee had gone cold 2 hours ago. His phone was buzzing with messages he had no interest in reading. The heater in the car was working fine, but it did not feel like enough. He was tired, not the kind of tired that a good night of sleep fixes, the kind that settles into your shoulders and stays there for weeks. He had been doing too much for too long, saying yes when he meant no, showing up when he wanted to disappear. He was 31 years old and already moving through his days like a man who had forgotten what he was moving toward. The highway was mostly empty, a few trucks far ahead, headlights in the rearview mirror that turned off at an exit and left him alone. The rain on the roof of the car was the loudest thing in his world. He had the radio off. He did not want music. He did not want voices. He just wanted to get home, take off his shoes, and sit in a quiet room until his brain stopped running. That was when he saw them. Two figures on the side of the road, just past a broken streetlight, so they appeared almost out of nowhere in his headlights, standing close together, not waving, not signaling, just standing there with their backs slightly turned to the wind. One of them was holding something over their heads. It took him a second to realize it was a plastic shopping bag, stretched open and held up with both hands, doing almost nothing against the rain. He passed them. Not by much, maybe 20 meters, but he passed them. And then something happened in his chest. Not dramatic, not loud, just a small, quiet pull. The kind of feeling that does not use words, but is very clear about what it wants. He slowed down. He sat there for a moment with his foot on the brake and his hazard lights blinking orange into the rain. He looked in his rearview mirror. He could see them. They had not moved. They were not running toward him. They were just standing there, watching his car, unsure. He put the car in reverse. He had not made a decision, not really. His body had made it before his mind caught up. He backed up slowly along the empty road until his car was level with them and he could see them clearly through the passenger window. Two girls, young. The older one looked maybe 22 or 23. The younger one was barely 18, if that. They were both soaked. Their clothes were stuck to their skin. Their hair was flat and dripping. The older one had a bag hanging from her shoulder, pressed tight against her side like it held something she could not afford to lose. They were both squinting against the rain, looking at his car with the careful, guarded look of people who have learned not to trust too quickly. He lowered the passenger window. The cold, wet air rushed in immediately. Rain spotted the inside of the door. He leaned slightly across the seat and said simply, "Where are you going?" The older girl did not move right away. She looked at him. She looked at the car. She looked at her sister. Something passed between them in that look, some kind of silent conversation that only people who have spent years together can have. Then she said a neighborhood name. It was about 6 or 7 minutes in the direction he had already been driving. He nodded. "Get in," he said. "I am going that way." Still the older girl hesitated, and he understood why. Two young women in the rain, a stranger in a car, an empty road at almost 11 o'clock at night. Hesitation was not only reasonable, it was smart. But the rain made the decision for them. A gust of wind came and flipped the plastic bag inside out, and both girls were suddenly completely exposed to it with nothing overhead at all. The younger girl made a small noise of frustration, and the older one reached for the door handle. They got in. The older girl took the front seat. The younger one slid into the back and immediately wrapped her arms around herself, shivering quietly. They both smelled like rain, like cold air, like exhaustion. Nathan turned the heat up a little more without saying anything. He pulled back onto the road. The hazard lights clicked off. Nobody spoke for a moment. It was not an uncomfortable silence exactly. It was the silence of people who do not yet know how much space to take up with each other. The older girl spoke first. She said, "Thank you." She said it simply, without the kind of over-thankfulness that people perform when they feel they owe something. She said it like she meant it and nothing more. Nathan nodded. He said it was no problem. She told him her name was Laura. She said the girl in the back was her sister, Claire. Claire said nothing. She was looking out the window at the rain and rubbing her hands together slowly. Nathan told them his name. He asked if they had been waiting long. Laura said about 40 minutes. She said the bus they needed had not come. She had called a cab, but the cab had canceled. She had tried to get through to a family member, but there had been no answer. She said all of this in a calm, flat voice, like she was recounting facts and had already done all the feeling about it earlier. Nathan kept his eyes on the road. He asked if they were all right. Fine, Laura said, just cold. He believed the second part. He was less sure about the first. They drove in the rain. The wipers swept back and forth. The heater filled the car with warmth. In the rearview mirror, Nathan watched Claire stop, shivering, bit by bit, as the heat reached her. At some point, her shoulders came down from around her ears. She pressed her forehead lightly against the cold glass of the window and watched the street lights pass. Laura had her bag on her lap and her hands folded on top of it. She was not tense exactly, but she was alert, aware of everything, the kind of alert that is not fear but is related to it. Nathan did not ask questions. He had the kind of instinct developed over years of being around people that told him when a person wanted to talk and when they wanted to simply exist without performing anything for anyone. Both of these girls, he sensed, were in the second category tonight. So he drove. At a red light, a song came on the radio softly. He had not remembered turning it on, but somehow it was on, something low and gentle with no words. Claire, in the back seat, let out a slow breath and closed her eyes for a moment, just a moment. Then the light turned green and her eyes opened again. They reached the neighborhood in just under 7 minutes. Laura directed him with short, clear instructions. Left here, straight on, the white gate at the end. The white gate appeared out of the rain. Behind it was a house with one light on downstairs. Nathan pulled up and stopped the car. Both girls moved to get out. Then Laura stopped. She turned in her seat and looked at him properly for the first time since she had gotten in. Not the careful, measuring look from before. Something more direct. She said, I know this is a strange thing to ask. She paused. Could I have your number, in case we ever need help again and there is no one to call? Nathan looked at her. The question sat in the car between them. He had not been expecting it, not because it was wrong. It was not wrong. It was, in fact, one of the most straightforward things anyone had said to him in a long time. She was not being forward. She was being practical, the way people are practical when life has taught them that help does not always show up when you need it, and when it does, you hold on to it. He gave her his number. She typed it into her phone carefully, one digit at a time, like she was afraid of getting it wrong. Thank you, Nathan, she said. She and Claire got out into the rain and walked quickly through the white gate. The younger one glanced back once, just briefly, before they disappeared behind it. The front door of the house opened, and the warm light from inside spilled out for a second before the door closed again. Nathan sat in his car in the rain. He did not pull away immediately. He sat there with his hazard lights off and the engine running and the radio still playing something low and wordless. He looked at the white gate. He thought about the plastic bag they had been holding over their heads. He thought about 40 minutes of standing in the rain waiting for a bus that never came. He pulled away. He drove the rest of the way home in the rain, hands steady on the wheel, and for the first time all evening, he was not thinking about the meeting that could have been an email or his cold coffee or the weight in his shoulders that would not leave. He was thinking about the way the younger girl had pressed her forehead against the glass and closed her eyes for just a moment when the music came on. He did not know their story yet. He did not know where they had come from that night, what they had been doing at 11 o'clock in the rain with a plastic bag and no ride and no one answering their calls. He would find out, not that night, but eventually. Some things begin quietly, a car pulling to the side of a road, a window rolled down in the rain. A question that costs nothing and changes everything. This was one of those things. He just did not know it yet. 3 days passed before the message came. Nathan had not thought about it much after that night. He had driven home, changed his clothes, eaten a late dinner standing over the kitchen counter, and gone to sleep. The next morning was already full of its own problems. A call that ran long, a deadline that crept closer, the ordinary machinery of a life that does not pause to wonder about strangers. He had more or less filed the whole thing under a quiet category in his mind, the kind that holds small moments that feel significant for an hour and then fade. A conversation with someone on a train, a stranger who held a door open in the exact right way. Things that brush against you and leave a small, unnameable warmth and nothing more. Then the message came. It was short. It said, "Nathan, this is Laura, the girl from the rainy road 3 nights ago. I hope this is okay. I just wanted to say thank you again. Claire has been talking about the music that was playing in your car. She wants to know the name of the song." He stared at the message for longer than it required. Then he smiled. He could not explain why the message made him smile the way it did. It was such a small thing, a thank you and a question about a song. But there was something in it, something in the image of a quiet girl who had said nothing the whole drive home, pressing her forehead to the glass, who had then gone home and talked about a song she had heard for less than 4 minutes in a stranger's car. It was such a human detail, the kind that makes a person feel like a person and not just a story. He messaged back. He told her he was glad they had gotten home safely. He said he honestly was not sure what the song had been. It was just the radio, but he would try to find it. He spent 20 minutes that evening going through radio stations, humming what he could remember of the melody to himself until he found something close. He sent it to Laura. She replied with a simple, "That is it. Claire says thank you." He replied, "Tell her she is welcome." And that again was supposed to be the end. It was not the end. A week later, Laura messaged again. This time it was not a thank you. She had a question. She was trying to get somewhere for an appointment, and the area was unfamiliar, and she was trying to understand the bus routes, but the information she was finding online did not match what she was actually seeing on the ground. She was not asking for a ride. She was asking if he happened to know the area. He did, actually. He had worked near there for 2 years. He sent her a detailed explanation, which stop to get off at, which direction to walk, a small landmark to watch for so she would know she had not gone too far. She followed it and arrived on time. She sent a message afterward that said, "The landmark worked. I would have walked right past without it." He found himself looking forward to finding out whether she had made it. That was the moment, though he did not mark it as a moment at the time, when something shifted. It was not dramatic. There was no particular feeling he could name and point to. It was more like a door that had been slightly ajar for a week had quietly swung open another inch. Over the following weeks, the messages continued. Sporadic, never daily, never demanding. Sometimes it was Laura asking a practical question. Sometimes it was just a short update, the kind you send to someone you are beginning to trust with small pieces of your life. She told him she was in her final year of nursing school. She told him the program was harder than she had expected, but that she could not imagine doing anything else. He told her he worked in logistics. She did not know much about logistics. He explained it briefly, and she said it sounded like a job where you spend all day trying to convince things to be in the right place at the right time. He told her that was the most accurate description he had ever heard. At some point, Claire started being mentioned more, not in a deliberate way, the way people mention someone who is simply present in their life. Claire made this for dinner. Claire stayed up too late again. Claire had an exam and was driving herself mad with studying. He began to get a picture of them, not a complete picture, more like a sketch. 2 sisters in a house that held something heavy inside it, a life arranged carefully around something neither of them said directly. He did not ask. It was not his place to ask, but he noticed the shape of what was not being said, the way you notice the outline of furniture in a dark room. Then one evening, Laura called instead of messaged. He almost did not answer. He was in the middle of making dinner, but something made him pick up. Her voice was different on the phone, smaller. She apologized for calling. She said she had a favor to ask and she felt strange about asking it in a message. He told her to go ahead. She explained there was something she needed to collect, a piece of medical equipment. It was heavy, too heavy to carry on a bus, and it needed to be picked up from a place that was about 20 minutes from the city center. She had looked at every option. A cab would cost more than she had right now. Borrowing a car was not possible. She had waited a week before asking him, hoping something else would come up. Nothing had. She did not say who the equipment was for. He said he would take her. They arranged it for the following Saturday morning. He showed up at the white gate at 9:30. Laura was already outside waiting, which told him something about her, not the kind of person who keeps others waiting, probably not the kind of person who asks for help easily either. She got in and they drove. She was different in daylight, on a day without rain, without the emergency of cold and wet and nowhere to go. More settled. She sat straight and kept her bag on her lap again, that same habit, and she looked out at the city moving past with a quiet, watchful expression. They talked more this time, real talking. not the practical exchange of information they had been doing over messages, but the kind of conversation where you say something and the other person says something that shows they were actually listening. He asked about nursing school. She talked about it with the kind of tired love that people have for the thing that is hard but right. She had failed one exam in her first year and had considered quitting for about 3 days, sitting in her room and staring at the ceiling. Then she had thought about why she had started, and she had gotten up and started again. He asked what had made her start. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said simply that watching someone you love be sick and not being able to do anything useful is one of the worst feelings in the world. She wanted to be useful. She wanted to know how to help, that was all. He did not ask who she had watched being sick. She had not offered it and he did not reach for it. But he held it, the weight of those 2 sentences, and he understood that he had just been given something true and careful and earned. They reached the place. He helped carry the equipment to the car. It was a machine, medical looking, with a handle and a cord wrapped neatly around the base. He did not ask what it was for. She did not explain. They loaded it into the back and drove back toward the city. On the way back, they passed a small bakery that had its lights on and a sign in the window. Laura said, almost to herself, Claire loves that place. He slowed the car. Do you have time? He asked. She looked at him, then she looked at the bakery. She checked her watch. A few minutes, she said. They went in. The place was warm and smelled like cardamom and butter and something faintly sweet. Laura ordered 2 things, wrapped them carefully to take away, and paid before he could offer. She caught his expression and said, You drove. This is mine. He let her. Back in the car, she held the small paper bag on her lap beside the other bag. She was quiet for a while. Then she said, Claire does not leave the house much right now, so I bring things back for her. He said nothing. He kept his eyes on the road. She said she used to love going out. She still does, really. It is just harder right now. He nodded. She did not say more, and he did not ask, but something had passed between them on that drive, something that did not need to be named to be real. He dropped her at the white gate again. She thanked him. She took the equipment out of the back with careful hands and set it down just inside the gate. Before she closed it, she turned and looked at him through the bars. She said, Nathan, I want you to know that you did not have to do any of this, the night in the rain or any of it after, I know that. He looked at her. She said, I just want you to know that it matters. Then she picked up the equipment and walked toward the house, and the white gate swung slowly shut behind her. He sat in the car for a moment. The paper bag from the bakery was gone. The back seat was empty. The city was bright and ordinary around him. Somewhere inside the house, a girl who did not go out much was about to get something from her favorite bakery, brought by her sister who had planned nothing and done everything. He started the car. He drove home thinking about nothing in particular and somehow thinking about everything. He did not hear from Laura for 11 days after that Saturday morning. Not that he was counting. He was not the kind of person who counts. But he noticed the way you notice a sound that has stopped, the absence of something that had become, quietly and without announcement, a part of the background noise of his days. The messages had never been constant. They had never been daily, but they had been regular enough that 11 days of silence felt like something worth noting. He did not message her. It was not his place to reach out. She had come to him each time. That was her way of doing things, deliberate, measured, never more than she intended. He respected it. He stayed quiet and let it be. Then on the 12th day, a message came. It was longer than her usual messages. She wrote in short, clear sentences, but there were more of them than before, and they came quickly, one after another, as if she had been holding them back and had finally decided to let them through. She said she was sorry for the silence. She said it had been a difficult couple of weeks. She said the medical equipment they had collected was for her mother. She said her mother had been unwell for a long time and recently things had become harder. She said she did not want to burden him with it. She was not saying it for sympathy. She just felt that he deserved to know the context. The night on the road, she said, they had been coming from the hospital. They had stayed later than expected, and the last bus had gone. He read the message twice. Then he sat back in his chair and looked at the ceiling for a while. He thought about the plastic bag held up against the rain. He thought about Laura's hand gripping her shoulder bag. He thought about Claire with her forehead against the car window and her eyes closed and the music playing softly. He thought about Laura's voice saying, watching someone you love be sick and not being able to do anything useful is one of the worst feelings in the world. He had heard that sentence, he had understood it was personal, but now the whole shape of it was clear and it was heavier than he had realized. He messaged back. He said he was glad she had told him. He said he was sorry about her mother. He said he meant that not as a thing people say, but as a real thing. He said if there was ever anything practical he could do, he hoped she would ask. She replied, "I will, thank you." They talked more that evening than they ever had before, not about the heavy things, not directly, but around them. She told him about a patient she had practiced on in her clinical hours who had been so grateful for her work that the patient had cried, and how Laura had not been prepared for that, how she had walked to the bathroom afterward and stood there for 5 minutes just breathing. He told her about the time he had driven 4 hours to collect his younger brother from a situation that his brother had refused to explain fully, and how he had just driven without asking questions because sometimes that was what people needed. Not questions, just the car. She said, yes, exactly that. He knew from the way she said it that she understood completely, that the thing he had described, the driving without asking, was familiar to her, that she had been on both ends of it. He started to understand, during those weeks, what it actually meant to be Laura and Claire in that house. Their father had left when Claire was young. There were other family members, an aunt in another part of the city, a cousin or two, but none of them close enough or present enough to be a real source of help. Their mother had held everything together for years, quietly and without complaint, the way certain people hold things together, by sheer stubbornness and love. And now she was the one who needed holding, and the two girls were doing it between them, fitting it around nursing school and studying, and the ordinary costs of being young adults with not enough money and too much responsibility. He did not learn all of this at once. It came in pieces, offered slowly, never more than Laura felt was appropriate for the moment. She was careful with her private life, she had learned to be, but she was also, he was discovering, deeply honest. She did not say things she did not mean, she did not perform emotions she was not feeling. When she said something was hard, it was hard. When she said she was all right, she usually was. He drove them a few more times over the following month, not often, never without being asked. A grocery run on a rainy Tuesday when their aunt had canceled at the last minute. A trip to a pharmacy on the far side of the city that stocked a particular medication their mother needed. Once, a quiet drive to a park, just Laura and Claire, while their mother rested, because Claire had said she needed to see something green and real, and Nathan had offered to take them without thinking much about it. That was the drive that stayed with him the most. Claire talked on that drive, really talked, not the brief and carefully selected words she had offered in previous exchanges. She talked about the drawings she had been doing, portraits mostly. She had a notebook full of them, she said, faces of people she had seen but never met. A woman on a bus who had fallen asleep with her chin on her chest and her hands folded in her lap. A man at a bus stop reading a book who had laughed out loud at something on the page. She captured these people because, she said, they were being themselves without knowing anyone was watching, and that was when a face was most true. He asked if she had ever shown them to anyone. She said, only Laura, and now you, I suppose, because I told you about them. He said he would like to see them sometime, if she ever wanted to show him. She looked out the window at the park they were passing through. She said maybe. It was a small word, maybe, but from Claire, who measured her words the way some people measure rare ingredients, it felt significant. At the park, he sat on a bench near the car while the two of them walked ahead along the path. He watched them from a distance. Laura was talking and Claire was listening, and at some point Claire laughed at something and reached over and pushed Laura lightly on the shoulder, and Laura stumbled dramatically and they both laughed more. He had not seen Claire laugh before. It changed her face completely, made her look her age, which was young, very young, too young to be carrying what she was carrying. He looked away, not because the moment was not good, because it was, and it was theirs, and some things are not meant to be observed too closely. He drove them home, and they said goodbye at the white gate the same way they always did. Laura thanked him. Claire looked at him for a moment with those careful eyes and then said quietly, it was a good park. He said he was glad. They went inside. He sat in the car and thought about nothing for a while, which was unusual for him. He was not a person who sat in silence comfortably. His mind was usually moving, turning things over, planning and replanning. But in that moment there was nothing to plan, no decision to make, no problem to solve. Just the white gate and the one light on downstairs, and the small, ordinary feeling of having been somewhere useful. He messaged Laura that evening to say he hoped their mother had rested well. She replied she did. She asked who the man was who kept driving us places. He smiled at that. He typed back, "What did you tell her?" Laura replied, "I told her you were a good person we found in the rain." He put the phone down. He's thought about that for a long time. A good person we found in the rain. He had been called many things in his life: reliable, stubborn, occasionally difficult, quietly funny by people who knew him well enough to catch it. But no one had ever said anything that landed quite the way those words did, that simple, that clean, without any extra decoration. He was not sure he had ever felt so accurately described. The call came on a Thursday. Nathan was at his desk when his phone lit up with Laura's name. He picked up immediately. She had never called without messaging first. He already knew, before he heard her voice, that something had shifted. She said hello. She said she was sorry to call without warning. Her voice was steady but thin, like a rope that is holding but has been pulled too tight. He asked if everything was all right. She said no. She said her mother was in the hospital. She said it had happened early that morning. She said she and Claire had been at the hospital since 6, and it was now past noon, and Claire had not eaten anything, and Laura was not sure how long they would need to be there, and she did not want to ask, but she did not know who else to call. He was already standing. He told her he was on his way. He made it to the hospital in just under 20 minutes. He texted Laura when he arrived, and she came down to meet him in the entrance hall. She looked like she had been awake for a very long time. She was wearing the same kind of clothes she always wore, practical and neat, but they had the look of clothes that had been slept in a little, or at least leaned against hard surfaces in. Her eyes were clear but tired. She was holding her bag the same way she always did, pressed against her side, but her knuckles were pale. She looked at him and said, "Thank you for coming." He said, "Where is Claire?" She led him upstairs. Claire was in a waiting area near the end of a corridor. She was sitting with her knees drawn up and her notebook in her lap. She was not drawing. She was just holding it, the way a person holds a thing they need to feel in their hands. She looked up when they arrived, and something in her face changed, not dramatically, but visibly, like a small release. Nathan sat down next to her. He did not say anything for a moment. He did not ask how she was or tell her it was going to be fine. He had always found those things hollow in hospitals, words that people say because silence is uncomfortable, not because the words are true. He just sat there. After a minute, Claire said quietly, "She had trouble breathing this morning. I heard it from my room." He nodded. Claire said, "I knew something was wrong before I even got up. You can tell, the sound is different." He said, "You know her well." Claire said, "I have been listening to her for 18 years. There was nothing to say to that, so he said nothing. He let it sit where it belonged, in the open air between them, true and heavy and real. Laura went to find a doctor she had spoken to earlier. Nathan stayed with Claire. He asked eventually if she wanted anything to eat. She said she was not hungry. He said he knew, but he was going to find something small anyway, and she could eat it or not, and either was fine. She looked at him for a moment and then nodded once. He went and found 2 sandwiches and 2 bottles of water and a small bar of chocolate from a machine down the hall. He brought them back and set them on the seat between them without making it a thing. She picked up one of the sandwiches after a few minutes and began to eat it slowly. He ate the other ones. They sat in the corridor and ate in silence, and through the window at the end of the hall, the sky outside was a flat, pale gray, and the city moved quietly below it. Laura came back after half an hour. She had spoken to the doctor. Their mother was stable. She was being monitored. It was serious but not immediately dangerous. There would be more tests. They would likely need to stay for the rest of the day. She sat down on the other side of Claire. Claire leaned her head against her sister's shoulder. Laura closed her eyes briefly and then opened them again. Nathan looked at the two of them and thought about what it cost to hold things together for a long time without anyone holding you. He thought about all the practical questions Laura asked him over text, the bus routes and the neighborhoods and the pharmacy addresses, and how none of them were ever really just practical questions. They were the questions of someone who was managing a life that had too many moving parts and not enough hands. He stayed for most of the afternoon. He did not stay because he was asked to. He stayed because leaving felt wrong, and he had learned to trust that feeling over the years. At some point, he went and got more water and a proper meal from the hospital cafeteria for both of them. Claire ate everything this time. Laura looked at the food and then at him and said, "You really do not have to do all this." He said, "I know." She said, "I feel like I owe you." He said, "You do not." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked away, out the window, and he could see her working through something in her mind, some thought she was deciding whether to say or keep. She said, "I am not good at accepting help. I never have been. It makes me feel like I am admitting something I do not want to admit." He said, "Like what?" She said, "Like I cannot do it on my own." He said, "No one can do everything on their own. That is not a weakness. That is just what it means to be a person." She was quiet. Then she said, "My mother says something similar." He said, "She sounds like a sensible woman." And Laura, to his surprise, let out a short, quiet laugh. Not a big laugh, not the kind you perform. The small, involuntary kind that comes when something catches you off guard and feels true all at once. Claire looked over at the sound of it. Laura shook her head slightly, smiling now, and said, "She is. She absolutely is." They stayed until the evening visiting period ended. By the time they stood up to leave, the corridor had grown quiet and the fluorescent lights above them had taken on that particular hospital evening quality, too bright and slightly unreal. Their mother was sleeping when they looked in. She looked smaller in the hospital bed than she did in their mother's mind, Nathan suspected. That is how it always is with the people who hold our worlds up. You do not realize how solid they are until you see them lying down. He drove them home. Nobody spoke much. Claire had her notebook open on her knee this time and was drawing, slowly, something he could not see. Laura watched the street go by. The city was doing what cities do at that hour, settling into its evening self, lights coming on in windows, people heading home. At the white gate, they got out. Laura stood by the car door for a moment. She looked like she was going to say something formal, something measured and grateful and complete, the kind of ending she would put on things. Instead, she said, "Will you let me know when you get home, just so I know you got back safely?" He looked at her. She said, "I know it is probably strange. You have done all the driving. I am that kind of person, I worry." He said, "It is not strange at all." He drove home. When he pulled into his street, he messaged her, "Home safe." She replied within seconds, "Good, thank you, Nathan, for all of it, today and every other day." He read it sitting in his parked car in the dark. He thought about the night in the rain when he had almost not stopped, about the 20 meters of road he had put between them before something pulled him back, about all the small, ordinary moments that had followed from that one unplanned decision. He thought about a girl pressing her forehead to glass and closing her eyes when a song came on, about another girl saying she wanted to be useful because doing nothing while someone you love suffers is the worst feeling in the world, about a woman in a hospital bed who had raised these two people, these two careful, strong, complicated people, and was doing it still in every way that mattered. He had not come into their lives looking for anything. He had not pulled over that night with any agenda or any expectation. He had just pulled over. And here, months later, he was sitting in a parked car at night reading a message that said thank you for all of it, and feeling, for the first time in a long while, like the shape of his days made sense. Not because everything was good, everything was not good. Their mother was in a hospital. Claire was drawing strangers because leaving the house was hard. Laura was studying for a degree while managing a life that most people twice her age would struggle with. None of it was easy, but he was part of it now, not in a large way, not in a way anyone would write about. In the small, practical, present way that matters most when things are hard, he was someone they could call. Someone who showed up, someone who found sandwiches in a hospital corridor and did not make it a favor that needed to be repaid. That was not nothing. That was, in fact, almost everything. The job interview was on a Wednesday. Laura had not mentioned it to Nathan until 2 days before. She was not someone who announced things in advance. She prepared quietly, alone, and only let people in when the thing was already underway and there was no going back. It was not secretiveness exactly. It was more like superstition, as if saying something out loud before it was done might jinx it somehow. She mentioned it in a message late on a Monday evening. She said she had an interview at a hospital on the north side of the city. She said it was for a placement she had wanted for a long time, a junior nursing position that would begin after her graduation, assuming she passed her final assessments. She said she was trying not to think about it too much. He replied, "You will be fine." She replied, "You do not know that." He replied, "No, but I have seen you navigate a city you did not know at night in the rain with 2 bags and a sister and no plan. You can handle a job interview." She did not reply immediately. Then she sent, "That is a strange thing to say, but also it helped, thank you." He smiled at the screen. On Wednesday morning, he sent her a message that just said, "Today's the day." She replied 3 hours later, "I almost talked myself out of going." He felt his stomach tighten slightly. He typed, "But." She replied, "But I got on the bus." That was all she said. He did not hear from her for the rest of the day. He went about his work and checked his phone more than usual without admitting to himself that he was doing it. The message came at 5:30 in the evening. He was in the kitchen making dinner and his phone buzzed on the counter. He picked it up. It was a voice note. He pressed play. He heard Laura's voice and then, immediately under it, the sound of her laughing. It was a real laugh, not performed, not controlled, the kind that gets ahead of you before you can shape it into something smaller. She tried to speak and the laughing interrupted it, and she tried again and got through, saying that they had offered her the position on the spot, right there in the room at the end of the interview, and she had said thank you very professionally and walked out into the corridor and then stood against the wall for 2 full minutes before she could move. The voice note ended. He stood in his kitchen holding his phone. Something warm moved through his chest, clean and uncomplicated, the kind of feeling that does not need analysis or a name, it just is what it is. He replied with a message, "I told you." She replied, "You told me." He replied, "Go celebrate, you earned it." She replied, "I'm going to buy something from that bakery and eat it on the bus home, and I'm going to feel very proud of myself." He replied, "Good, you should." She replied, "We are going to tell Mum tonight." He read that last message several times. Their mother had come home from the hospital 2.5 weeks after the Thursday he had spent in the corridor with Claire and sandwiches and flat gray light. She had come home slower and quieter and with new equipment in her room and a visiting nurse twice a week, but she had come home. The house had its center back, and even from the outside, from the slight change in how Laura's messages sounded, he could feel the difference it made. He replied to Laura, "She is going to be so proud." Laura replied, "She already is. She keeps telling everyone I am going to be the best nurse in the city." He replied, "She is not wrong." There was a pause, then Laura replied, "Nathan, can I ask you something?" He replied, "Of course." She replied, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not stopped that night, on the road in the rain?" He stood in his kitchen for a moment with the question sitting in front of him. He thought about it honestly, the way it actually was, not the comfortable version. He had been tired and running late and privately miserable in the low-grade way that people who are doing fine by all external measures can still be privately miserable. He had almost not stopped. He had passed them and driven on for 20 meters before something pulled him back. If the rain had been lighter or his mood had been worse or the road had curved in a different direction, he might have told himself they looked fine, they had a phone, someone else would stop. He might have kept driving. He replied, "Yes, I have thought about it." She replied, "Me too." He replied, "What do you think would have happened?" She replied, "We would have eventually found another way home. We always do, but I think about everything after, the messages, the drives, the hospital day, all of it, and I think it would have just not existed. We would have been 3 people who never knew each other." He replied, "And instead?" She replied, "And instead you are the person my mother asks about, the one she calls the man from the rain who kept showing up." He leaned against the kitchen counter. He thought about that phrase, the man from the rain who kept showing up. It was not a grand thing to be. It was not heroic. He had not saved anyone or changed the direction of a life. He had driven people places, found sandwiches in corridors, looked up a song, explained bus routes, sat in a chair when sitting in a chair was what was needed. But when you put it all together, the whole shape of it across those months, it was not small. It was not small at all. He replied, "I am glad I reversed." She replied, "So am I." She replied again a moment later, "Claire wants to show you the notebook. She said to tell you she has been waiting for the right time and she thinks now is close to the right time." He felt that in a way he could not fully describe. Claire, who measured every word like a rare ingredient, who had sat in the back seat in the rain saying nothing, who drew strangers' faces because they showed their real faces when they thought no one was watching. Claire, who had drawn through the fear in a hospital corridor and eaten the sandwich without being asked twice and said quietly it was a good park. He replied, "Tell her I am honored." A few days later, he went to the White Gate again. Not for a drive, not for anything practical. Laura had asked if he would come for tea, just that, tea and no particular agenda. Their mother was resting comfortably. The visiting nurse had been that morning. Claire had something to show him. He brought a small box of pastries from a bakery he had passed on the way, not the one near the park. A different one closer to where he lived. He had not planned it. He had just seen the window and thought of them. The gate opened before he reached it. Claire had been watching from the window. She led him into a front room he had not been in before. It was small and warm and quietly lived in, the kind of room that holds years of ordinary life in every surface. There was a sofa and 2 chairs and a table against the wall with a collection of things on it, photographs, a ceramic dish, a small plant in a terracotta pot that was doing its best. Laura was in the kitchen. She called out that the kettle was on and to sit down and not be formal. He sat. Claire sat across from him. She had the notebook. She held it for a moment without opening it. She said, "I started it 3 years ago. I have filled almost the whole thing." He said, "Can I see?" She opened it. He looked. The drawings were extraordinary. Not in a technical sense, though the technique was careful and clearly developed. They were extraordinary because of what they captured. Every face in that notebook was caught in a completely private moment. A man laughing at a book, a woman sleeping on a bus, a child watching something in a shop window with total concentration, a very old man sitting alone at an outdoor table looking at nothing in particular with an expression that managed to be both tired and at peace. He turned the pages slowly. He did not rush. Claire sat and watched him look at her work without saying anything, which told him she trusted him with it. She would not have sat quietly like that with someone she did not trust. Near the back of the notebook, he stopped at a page. It was a drawing of a car interior, seen from the back seat. 2 people in the front, a man with both hands on the wheel, a woman in the passenger seat with a bag on her lap. Through the windshield, the road ahead was just visible in the rain. The man's face was barely visible, just the side of it, but something in the posture and the tilt of the head made him look steady, like someone who knew where they were going. The woman in the passenger seat was looking forward too, but her hands on the bag were drawn very carefully, very specifically, the knuckles slightly tight. And the rain on the glass was everywhere. He knew what this was, he knew when it was from. He looked up at Claire. She met his eyes. She did not look embarrassed. She looked like someone who has said an important thing and is now waiting quietly to see if it was understood. He said, "You drew this from memory." She said, "I remember most things I see. I always have." He looked at the drawing again. Laura appeared in the doorway with 2 mugs of tea and looked from Nathan to Claire and back again. She looked at the notebook and understood immediately. She set the mugs down and said nothing. She just sat on the sofa and wrapped her hands around her own mug and let the moment be what it was. He turned the page. The next drawing was also of a road, but this one was empty. Just the road and the rain and a pair of headlights coming toward the viewer from a distance, caught at the exact moment before they would illuminate whatever stood in their path. He sat with that image for a long time. Then he set the notebook down gently on the cushion beside him. He picked up his mug. The tea was the right temperature, not too hot, not too cool. Someone had been paying attention. Outside the window, the city was doing what it always does, moving quietly, carrying its people from one place to another, all of them inside their own small orbits, most of them never touching anyone else's. And inside this small, warm room, a man who had almost not stopped was sitting across from a girl who had drawn him anyway, both of them drinking tea in the early afternoon, while the sister who had knocked on his car window read something on the sofa, and the woman who had raised these 2 people rested down the hall. It was not a dramatic ending. It was not a twist or a revelation. There was no single moment where the story turned on its axis and everything changed. It had already been changing slowly the whole time. That is how the real things happen, not in one big moment, in 100 small ones that you only see when you turn around and look at where you started. He had started on a rainy road at 11 o'clock at night, tired and running late, almost certain he was going to keep driving. He was glad, in a way that had no bottom to it, that he had not. He put down his mug, he looked at Claire, he looked at Laura, he said, "This is a very good notebook." Claire said, "I know." And Laura, without looking up from her reading, laughed. And outside, the city kept moving. And inside, for a while, everything was quiet and good.